The Road Murder. The murder at Road Hill House on the 30th of June 1860. Who murdered Savile Kent? A true Victorian who done it. In June 1860, Road Hill House was occupied by Samuel Kent, aged 59, a sub-inspector of factories, and his two families, for they were separated, and that seemed clear in the organisation of the household. The children of his first wife, Mary Ann Kent, who had died in mysterious circumstances in 1852, were Elizabeth, Mary Ann, William, and Constance. And the second family, the children of his second wife, Mary Nee Pratt, who he'd married in 1853. She had been the family governess from 1840 and was at this time again pregnant. They had had 3 children: Amelia, 5, Francis Savile, aged 3 and 10 months, and Evelyn, who was 20 months. The murder was committed on the night of the 29th, 30th of June 1860. The body of Francis Savile Kent was found on the morning of the 30th of June in the disused servants' privy. A murder inquiry was soon launched by Wiltshire Police under Superintendent John Foley of Trowbridge, aided by the Somerset Constabulary, for the village was part Wiltshire and part Somerset at that time. The police soon found themselves out of their depth and were not helped by the attitude of Samuel Kent, who from the outset was certain that the killer was from the outside, although what evidence there was showed that it was not to be the case. To begin with, he would not allow the police even access to the whole house, and it became clearer that more than one person was involved. Roland Rodway of Trowbridge, his legal advisor, told Kent he felt this was the position and resigned. On the morning of the discovery, Samuel Kent remained in bed while the rest of the household was in chaos searching for the boy. And when he did get up, he immediately left the scene to go to Trowbridge on the pretext of calling the police. The investigation included a missing nightdress, the discovery of a blood-stained chemise, which discovery for 5 months the police managed to cover up. Policemen who were put into the house to ascertain the murderer ended up being locked up in the kitchen all night. The inquest failed to question most of the family and was later investigated by the Home Office. Scotland Yard sent one of their best detectives, Inspector Jonathan Witcher, who the life of has been based on suspicions of Mr. Witcher. A further sitting of the magistrates went on into the autumn. Constance Kent and the nurse Elizabeth Goff were arrested but released. In 1865, Constance Kent dramatically confessed to the crime. Her confession and how she did it just does not add up or make sense. She was imprisoned, released, went to Australia, and died there at the age of 100. Having read the evidence and the subsequent books, which I will speak of later, I will give details of the way I consider the murder was committed, which in many ways agrees with other authors, but there are a few other ways which I have seen that they have not picked up on. So, a true Victorian murder. Who murdered Francis Savile Kent? The background to the murder. Road Hill House in 1860. June 1860, Road was then a village in Wiltshire, spelt R-O-A-D. The name changed in 1919 to R-O-D-E. Village that was split, part being Somerset, and Road Hill House itself was in the county of Wiltshire. That itself was to cause problems. Road Hill House was built in 1790 and still stands there at the edge of the village, a three-story mansion with some 19 rooms and excessive grounds. The house was and is now a Langham House in a position which overlooks the village, illustrating clearly the division there was between the inhabitants' house and the humble cottage owners who lived in the rest of road. To the side of the house, there is a lane leading to the fields beyond and then on to Tellisford. There are a number of cottages still in this lane. At that stage, the lane was called Workhouse Lane. Who then lived in Roadhill House in June 1860? Samuel Kent and his family. Samuel Kent was a man who was rumoured to be an illegitimate son of the Duke of Kent, father of Queen Victoria. Samuel had been born in 1801. His father was recorded as Samuel Luck Kent, and his mother had the name of Saville. Samuel married in Hackney in 1829 to Mary Ann Windus. The Windus family were wealthy coach builders. The family of Samuel and Mary Ann, their firstborn child, died when a year old. Two daughters were born, Mary Ann in 1831 and Elizabeth the following year. These two daughters were never to marry and lived together into old age, Mary Ann dying in 1913 and Elizabeth in 1922. A move to Cliff Cottage, Sidmouth, Samuel began his career as sub-inspector of factories. A factory inspectorate was created through the Act for the Regulation of Cotton Mills and Factories. The Factory Act of 1833 required an inspection of factories to ensure new laws were complied with that allowed no child workers under the age of 9, reducing the hours of children between the ages of 9 to 13. They were allowed to work and they had to have break for a schooling each day. To enforce this act, 4 factory inspectors were appointed, with 8 sub-inspectors. The area covered by Samuel took him to parts of Devon, Somerset, Dorset, and Wiltshire. The Kent's life in Sidmouth. Samuel Kent was known as a man who was living above his means. He was seen as a man who liked a grand life. But behind the doors of Cliff Cottage, he was a man who was cutting the number of servants to balance his budget. Mary Ann's health began to suffer, mostly from consumption, although if Samuel was to be believed, she also was suffering from a mental breakdown. The 2 eldest daughters, however, always maintained she was never insane. However, according to Samuel, she was now unable to run the household. But Mary Ann and Samuel continued to produce a family. In 15 years, Mary had several miscarriages and gave birth to 7 more children. 4 died in infancy. In addition to Mary Ann and Elizabeth, Edward was born in 1835, Constance in February 1844, and William in July 1845. Often Samuel forced Mary Ann into the solitude of her own room, and by 1840 a governess had been appointed for Mary Ann, Elizabeth, and Edward. That governess was Mary Pratt, aged 20, described as capable, clever, and pretty. Soon Samuel's eyes and actions turned away from Mary Ann, his wife, to the governess, Mary Ann Pratt. After the birth of William in 1845, Samuel took another room in the house, close to that of Mary Ann Pratt. The children, particularly Edward, were known to begin to resent the situation that existed in Cliff Cottage. So, to avoid the gossip that was starting, in 1848, Samuel and his family moved to Walton in Gordano, near Clevedon in Somerset. But the move did not avoid the gossip. Later, the servants of the time acknowledged that everyone knew of the relationship that was developing between Samuel and Mary Pratt. By now, the governess had the complete control of the household, and the servants were told to regard Mary Pratt as mistress of the household, not Mary Ann Kent. 1851, Edward left for naval school at Gosport and was to die of yellow fever while at sea in 1858. In March 1852, the Kent family were on the move again, this time to Wiltshire, to the village of East Colston near Westbury, where Samuel bought Bayton House, a house of 20 rooms. Here at East Colston, Mary Ann Kent was to endure even more seclusion, often being left in her room alone, although she did have the company of her children with her. By now, Constance, at the age of 8, was beginning to realize the situation that existed in the home. In early days, Constance was said to be very close to the governess, but now she behaved very badly in her lessons. Then, very suddenly, Mary Ann Kent died. There were and still are questions that could be asked about her sudden death. On 1st of May 1852, Mary Pratt left Bayton House to go to visit her father, who was seriously ill. The following day, Mary Ann Kent developed severe stomach pains and within a day was dead at the age of 44. Edward was still at sea at that time. However, the 3 daughters and William were still at home. And soon what the children must have expected happened. In August 1853, in Lewisham, London, Samuel married Mary Pratt. The 3 daughters were bridesmaids at the wedding. It was said that they followed Mary Pratt down the aisle as their governess and returned behind her as their new stepmother. Soon a second family began to arrive with the birth of Mary Amelia in 1855 and Frances Saville in August 1856. The first of the family of Mary Ann Kent were beginning to be placed in the second position. Resentment grew, particularly between Mary Kent, the former governess, and Constance. And this was to be seen in the house situation there and in later developments. By 1854, Samuel was again unsettled, partly again due to the gossip following the death of Mary Ann. So this time they moved to Wiltshire, to the village of Road. Here at Road Hill House, the division of the family was seen again, as Elizabeth and Mary shared a second floor room, Constance and William having their own rooms also on the second floor, which was shared with the 2 resident servants, who occupied the other fourth bedroom. William particularly was expected to use the back stairs only, as it was said that his boots made too much noise and brought mud into the house. On the first floor, the rooms were occupied by Samuel and Mary and the younger children. A third child, Evelyn, was born to Mary in 1858. During those 5 years that the Kents were at Road, it's recorded as many as 200 servants came and went. Many gave their reasons, as they considered they were the objects and victims of Samuel's pursuits. For the position of full inspector of factories. So this was the family at Road Hill in 1860. Samuel, age 59, Mary 40, Mary Ann 28, Elizabeth 27, Constance 16, William 14, Mary Amelia 5, Frances Saville 3 and 10 months, and Evelyn 20 months. By that time, Mary was again pregnant by 8 months. The resident servants in the house were the nursery maid, Now, Elizabeth Goff, who had been with the family since November 1859, she was aged 22, and two Sarahs. Sarah Kerslake was the cook, and Sarah Cox the housemaid. This then was the household on the eve of crime, 29th of June 1860. The crime. Samuel had been away for a few days on business and returned on Friday the 29th of June. Before leaving, he left instructions that his dark lantern glass had to be repaired. So it was sent to Thomas Fricker, the local handyman, and on that day he returned it to Road Hill House. Friday the 29th was a busy day at Road Hill House. The sweep, Henry Noller from Trowbridge, had been to sweep the nursery, scullery and kitchen chimneys. Elizabeth Goff, assisted by 14-year-old Emily Doole, a local girl who was the nursery maid, the daughter of Edward and Emma Doole of the village, were kept occupied cleaning the nursery after the sweep. Between 7 and 7:15 in the evening, the outside staff, together with Emily Doole, Mary Holcombe, the charwoman, and the outside staff of James, her son, the gardener groom, and John Holloway, the odd job boy, who has been described as a stupid-looking lad, left the house and locked the garden gate as they went. So at Road Hill House on the 29th of June, there remained 9 family members, 3 of them being small children, 3 resident servants. The 3 children soon quickly settled to sleep. So a purge had been sent from the doctor and administered to him. And the rest of the timeline of that evening is recorded as being at 9 o'clock. Sarah Cox secured the dining room window. At 9:45, the family met in the dining room with the servants for evening prayers. The servants then returned to the kitchen for a cup of tea. Samuel Kent released his Newfoundland dog to roam the backyard, and William and Constance retired. 10:30, the 2 Sarahs locked the rest of the house, and it is thought placed the knife box outside the back door ready for cleaning the following morning. At 10:45, Elizabeth and Mary Ann went up to bed by the front stairs. At the same time, Sarah Cox and Sarah Kerslake went up the back stairs to bed. By 11 o'clock, Mary Kent and Elizabeth Goff both went to bed. So the movement of the household up to that time is accounted for, apart from Samuel Kent. What time he retired to bed, no one knows. He was known to have checked the security of the building each night with his dark lantern. And so Saturday the 30th of June. The day dawned, a bright summer's morning, unlike the rest of the year, which so far had been very wet. The first person to arrive at 5 o'clock on that Saturday morning was James Holcombe, who left his house in Workhouse Lane, unbolting the garden door, securing the dog. He set about his daily task. At 5:45, the 2 indoor servants got up. Sarah Kerslake coming down the rear stairs, Sarah Cox the front stairs. Here she discovered the first unusual event of the day. The drawing room door was open, which she had locked the previous day, and the drawing room window was also open by about 6 inches. A rather stiff window to open, it would not open more than that height. At 6:30, Mary Holcombe arrived, and Elizabeth and Emily Doole at 7 o'clock, and she began to heat the kettles for the children's baths. She was rather surprised to see Saville was not in his cot, but she said it was not her place to ask questions. Sarah Kerslake lit the stove in the scullery, ready to scald the milk. Elizabeth Goff was the next to move at 7:15, going to Samuel and Mary's room, asking, "Are neither of the children with you?" "What do you mean, neither?" Mary asked. The nurse replied, "Master Samuel, is he not with you?" "With me? Certainly not," his mother responded. "Well, he's not in his bed," came the nurse's unexpected reply. With this, Mary Kent rushed across the landing to the nursery. The view of the empty cot seemed strange. The sheets were neatly folded, with a deep impression on the pillow. The nurse was later to comment on the state of the cot. It was as if his mother or I had made it. The nurse was asked when she first noticed Savile was missing. 5 a.m. was her reply. "Why did you not tell me?" his mother asked. "I thought you'd taken him," the nurse said to the mother. Mary Kent replied, "You wicked girl! I told you yesterday he was too heavy for me to carry. Now go upstairs and see if his sisters have him." Elizabeth Goff did so and received a negative reply. We may well ask, while all this was going on, where was Samuel Kent? He was remaining in his bed. Only on his wife's return did he move. Then he got up and asked Sarah Cox about the window being found open. Next, he ran out of the house, passing Holcombe, Holloway, and the labourer Daniel Oliver, asking, "Has anybody seen my little boy?" "No, sir," they replied. "He's lost, stolen, carried away. Is there a policeman about?" "Yes, sir. There's Urch." "Then go and fetch him." Holloway went off to find Beastie Urch. What did Samuel Kent do next? He left the scene of the crime and his wife and family, giving strict instructions Mary Kent was not to be told anything. He left in his phaeton carriage to dash to Trowbridge to contact Inspector Jonathan Foley. Before leaving, he sent word via William also to contact P.C. Urch. Holloway was already on his way. William set off uncertain where to go, but met the parish constable, who was also the village baker, James Morgan. Urch was already on his way to Roadhill House, but he was uncertain where his duties really lay, as he was a Somerset policeman and the house was in Wiltshire. However, after consulting with Morgan, they decided to head to the house together. As they walked over the green, Samuel Kent was seen to drive to Trowbridge, and they gave him the message that he would only need to go as far as Southwark, as PC Heritage, who was based there, could pass the message on to Superintendent Foley in Trowbridge. Samuel Kent also saw two local men on the green, William Nutt and Thomas Benger, and said to them, "Go search for my lost child." Nutt said to Benger, "We might as well search for a dead child as for one alive." So the family, the servants, Nutt, Benger, P.C. Urch, with Parish Constable Morgan, all begun to search for the missing boy. It was not long before Nutt and Benger walked towards the servants' privy a few yards from the house. Here, firstly, he found a blood-stained newspaper. And the next part will be in part 2.